Hi everyone, this is Angie and Ben, and welcome to our homestead. Working on the string lines to support the tomatoes up to our bamboo trellis. And I built this pretty simple jig. I have a clamp on the other end of my building. I measured 9 feet, drew a pencil line on my workbench. Now all I have to do is tie a little loop to hook it. Snip it at 9 feet. This is the perfect jig because I don't need to count the extra slack that builds the knot. All right, got these nice pretty strings here ready to go. Got a loop on one end, I have a little weight here, a scrap of metal and a carabiner. Hopefully this will be heavy enough to clip onto one end of the string, throw it over, and then pull back down to me to complete the loop. Received a bag of these tomato clips we've never tried before, but I think it's as simple as folding it, clipping the string in the hinge, putting the circle around the tomato plant. Let's see how it goes. We kept this 50-foot bed covered with landscape fabric all winter. This is the most effective mulching technique that we've found to prevent weed growth for our crop areas. We have attempted other mulching techniques such as wood chip mulch. However, that has to be raked out of the way to make room for the plants. We previously burned holes for our crops in our 6-foot wide landscape fabric. This means that we have established areas where the plants go and established areas where the walkways will be. We simply just rake the wood chip mulch to the side where the walkway is so it does not interfere with the growth of our crops. Since we do have some crops growing in the winter, we can't use a huge silage tarp to prevent weeds throughout the whole garden. This is why we have to keep the 6-foot wide landscape fabric just over the beds that we're trying to mulch for the winter. The downside is that since we already have holes burnt in this fabric, weeds will grow up in the little holes designed for crops. So to prepare any bed, I have to go through and pull weeds that grew through those holes. I'm using the exact same technique that I developed for the tomato plants last month, where I take half of the blades off of the tiller to keep a channel dug just wide enough for the new plants without disturbing too much biodiversity in the soil. To get this right, I had to pre-measure the hole spacing from the fabric that I had previously taken off of the bed, just to make sure the holes would line up with the tilled areas. Besides the use of a landscape fabric mulch, the only difference between our 50-foot bed of peppers from our 50-foot bed of tomatoes is that I fill the tilled trench back in because we don't have to lay the crops down in the hole. The tilling is simply used to loosen up the soil and to remove any weed roots that may have been there. After a quick collection of rocks, we're ready to put the fabric back on, weigh it down, and transplant our pepper crops. We burned holes in this landscape fabric last year. Half of the fabric has holes burned at 1 foot increments and the other half at 16-inch increments. We decided to use this as an experiment to see which spacing the peppers prefer. We were able to transplant 70 peppers across 8 different varieties in order to fill up this bed. We planted as many as we could just as an experiment because this is the first year we're growing peppers outside of the greenhouse. There's lots of informal terminology when gardening, but basically what we're saying here is that we're flipping a bed and transitioning from one crop to the next. In this case, we are planting a totally different variety of crop than what was there before. So we're raking out the rocks and the weeds, we're adding a layer of compost, and we're making sure our walkway is well mulched. We planted melon and sweet corn in this area. We've been harvesting our onion greens throughout the spring, but now the onion bulbs themselves are big enough to harvest, and we need to get them out of this bed so we can get some other crops growing. So this is our best opportunity to get them all dried out and get them ready for meals. Just like our onion greens, we've been harvesting our lettuce leaves all season, but now is the time where the leaves are the biggest they're going to get before they turn bitter. So we need to eat these as fast as possible. Basically, we're having a lot of salads for meals. I personally like to harvest greens in a basket or something like this with holes in it, where I can rinse it outside before I even bring it in, just as a preliminary rinse to get some of the dirt off of the lower leaves. I do always cut them up and rinse them in a salad spinner before my meals. We actually grew radishes in a couple places around the homestead because they have such a tight crop spacing and they act great as a cover crop just to prepare the bed and break up the soil for the next round of crops. You'll see a common theme with our harvest where we like to give a good preliminary rinse before we bring them inside, just to get some of the dirt off. There's also a lot of aphids that we'll have to maybe scrub off by hand in the sink before we eat the food. And last but certainly not least is spinach, one of my favorites personally. Here you can see I'm thinning the spinach crop. We planted them way too close, and then I'm going through and cutting the leaves off that are encroaching on the neighboring plants. By the end of the month, these leaves got really big, much bigger than you see here, but they're still just as delicious. This was our most diverse harvest we've ever had here on the homestead. If you want to see more videos like this, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Thanks.